how to do good better, how to do more good in the world, right? How to think about good. What does it mean to do good? So all sorts of philosophical questions. So today we'll take this one step further. At the end of the session last week, there was one tool that I wanted to show us. I think it's important for us to acknowledge our privilege, because we are privileged. Just by the fact that we're in Hong Kong, it already gives us a certain status in the world. Just by the fact that we're attending Ivy League Asian University, HKU, that gives us an additional privilege. So it could be that we came from like a lower social status in Hong Kong, but even that lower status in Hong Kong would be much higher status than everybody else. So I think it's a good exercise for us in general to know how good we have it. So Effective Altruism, Peter Singer, and a bunch of other folks give us the tools to think about these things. So if we go to this impact calculator and how rich am I, so we can like click on this, and we can think once we graduate from HKU, we'll have a specific opening salary, and then the salary hopefully will increase the more tenure we have, the more time we spend in industry or in academia or nonprofit, whatever that is, right? So we can punch in the numbers over here. So let's say that I come from Hong Kong. Let's say that my income is about 20,000 a month, which I think is much lower than the Hong Kong average income, but we're just students, so we just graduated. It will take us some time to catch up with the rest of Hong Kong, right? So let's say 240,000 a month. For now, we're just one adult. Perhaps that will change later when we have a family and children. So if you have a household income of 240,000 annual, what does this mean? It means that you're in the 2.5% top percent in the world. So you can compare yourself. You're 14.4 times the global mean. So you can think, do you want to share some of this privilege? Do you want to give this to others? Is there a point in doing all of that? So let's say that you've decided, like many effective altruists, so Peter Singer was talking about Toby Ord, who we'll come back to, who decided to give anything that he earns more than 18,000 pounds a year. He's going to give to charity, but you don't have to be that generous. You can decide how generous you want to be, if at all. But you can play with this and say, let's say that I just give like 5% of my income every year. What can I do with this? Just by giving money, not even doing anything else beyond that. And then you can see that with this, you can do a distribution of the 309 malaria nets that will help prevent mosquito nets that will help prevent malaria. And then all sorts of treatments, and basically helping to really save like half a life every year. So by the end of your life, you would have saved a good number of people. So you can calculate your charity and see if this is something, how much impact would you have, calculate your suggested annual, and then what would happen with this, and so forth. So I think it's just like a good idea for us to get of, let's say that we just want the basic minimum of sharing our privilege with others by giving 1%, 2%. Even if now you say, I am too poor, I need to get through because I have family and I have all sorts of other things. Another thing that we can consider is just having sort of a pledge of, when I get to 40,000 a month, I am willing to give 1%. When I get to 50,000, I am willing to give 2%. You know, you can think about whatever you want to do, but just if we focus on money, this is already a lot of good that we can do by giving money. And then we can talk about all the things that we talked about last week. It's like, how do I know that the money actually goes to where it's supposed to go? Can I guarantee that? So Effective Altruism, Peter Singer, and a bunch of other good souls are trying to help us understand where that money goes to and how to optimize that in order to make that effective, okay? But good news is, I think we can do a lot more than just give away money, because the privilege that we have is not only in the income that we get, but also in our intellectual capacity and our influence in the Hong Kong society in order to get things done. So I just want you to consider that there's money and there's other stuff. And in this course, we're going to try and do some of this other stuff. So putting the scientist hat, activating our mind in order to try and solve some of the big problems that are out there. Okay, it's okay. They'll find the other door. All right. Some reminders. This is our OSF public folder if you haven't found this already. Course summary, we try and help each other. So thank you to those who went on the course summary and put stuff in. I already duplicated what we did last year, so you have a good base. You come second after the session yesterday. So you can already see people updating stuff that you're going to face today, but then you can optimize that even further. And if you do this, there's some rewards for you. The first reward is it's a better summary because everybody contributes to this. So at the end of the course, you have a good summary of what went on here. Another thing is that I go over this, so I make sure that everything is accurate so that you know that if you have a course summary, it's not something that you maybe misunderstood, but that I validated. And I also give bonuses. So the top performers, the top 2 in this class, get a certain amount of points. It's written in the syllabus. And then there's 5 more that get a little bit of a less of a bonus. And all of them are acknowledged in the course summary, which we, of course, share publicly with the world so that they know what kind of discussions and what kind of things we do in class. So you can see already that they did a really good job last year. Let's try and do this better than they did, contribute a little bit more from our discussions. Every class is a little bit different, so we have different angles to this, different things to think about. So please do go and contribute to this. Even if you do your own summary, you can, at the end of the session or at the end of the course, go in and update stuff. So it's never too late. I do this in the last week of the semester. So just know that it's out there, and please help us to update this for what's happening in our session. If you haven't done this, please go over the syllabus. Please finish by the end of the second week, which is this week. ADRA period, make sure that you do the syllabus quiz. You can't fail this. It's very, very easy, just to give us some details, and then make sure that you're ready and that you understand the expectations of you in this class. So this is what we're doing. We're leveraging psychological science in order to address the most urgent challenges in our society. All right, so we'll start with some exercises connecting to last week, psychological science. So I'm going to describe an experiment to you. This is an experiment that is very classic in our literature. And I want you to put the scientist hat on, and I want you to try and predict what the result of this experiment is. And I want us to try and discuss what are the possible outcomes of this experiment. So in this experiment, we had 3 conditions. I'm describing 2 of them over here. I actually ran this in 2019, Fundamentals of Social Psychology, in a class of about 70, and I will show you the results. And we also ran this as a replication in a workshop that I did last month, 2 months ago in Norway. So this is how it goes. It's a between-subject design. So subjects, participants, students are randomly assigned to one of these conditions. In this condition, I describe a person, or I show a photo of a person, and I say, given a Hong Kong student salary or allowance or whatever it is that you have, how much would you be willing to donate in order to save this little girl? It's a little bit perhaps familiar to what we talked about last week. Then it was a girl drowning in a pond, right, in the harbor, or perhaps a girl in South America or in Africa, right? So here we have 2 options, and each participant sees only one of these 2 options. Half of the participants, or in this case a third, see only Rokia. So given a middle-class Hong Kong student status, how much money would you be willing to donate to save Rokia here? The other group, the second condition, saw these 2 together. So given a middle-class Hong Kong student status, how much money would we be willing to donate to Rokia, and then with Musa? So you have 2 of them over here. So I want you to try and think, what are the possible outcomes here and what is your prediction? And then put that in. What do you predict the outcome would be if we ran this experiment together? So I'll give you a moment to think about this. Punch in your result. What do you predict will happen? And then I want us to discuss about this. So try and think what would happen here. What would be rational? Is the human response related to what's rational or not? All right, so what are your thoughts? We have two conditions. One of them only has Rakia and one has Rakia and Musa. What are your predictions? What do you think will happen here? What are the options that we have? We have three options. What kind of results can we have? First option?
When it's two children.
Two children. Rakia and Musa higher than just Rakia. Yeah? Why would that happen?
Because supposedly two children will need more money for just one.
Why supposedly?
I mean, they need more money to survive.
In reality, right? Two people just need more money than one, right? Yeah. So this is already a very good option, but this option actually has a few options in it, right? What kind of options can there be for two more than one? Like, what's your expectation here? How much higher for two than for one? Equal.
Same.
Double.
Yeah.
So double for two than for one. Why? Because we measure human lives with this kind of donation, and then we say, okay, now we have two. We just add another chunk. That. What other options do we have? Thank you. What other options? If not doubling? Okay.
You like I need to donate all the money to Rakia. Like there's only one person there.
Yeah.
And then there's Rakia, and those that would feel like I need to split it amount to them fairly.
Yeah.
Like 500 per person.
Okay. So same amount for the 1,000 for Rakia and then 1,000 for Rakia and Musa when each one of them gets 500. Okay. So equal amount for both of them because this is maybe the maximum that I can give. I just want to do the most good that I can and I can afford $1,000. But what that means is that per person, actually it's half, right? So each one of them gets half of that. So that's another option. It could be that we're just giving away as much as we have, the maximum that we have, right? Something like that. Good. Another option, which I just mentioned when I was trying to figure out what you were saying, is that instead of doubling, let's say that 1,000 is not our maximum and we can afford more, but we're saying we can't do 2,000, but we'll give a little bit more because it's two people and we want to compensate for that, right? So we had the option of double. We have the option of a little bit less than double. So the second person perhaps per head will be a little bit lower than that. And then we have the option of there are no differences between giving to one person and giving to two people, right? What other options do we have? Yes?
Maybe I would give more to just Rakia than the two person are combined.
Yeah. So for example, if Rakia would be 1,000, for Rakia and Musa would be how much?
800.
800 together. So means like 400 per child. Why would that happen?
Because when I see only Rakia picture there, maybe I would feel kind of a direct personal connection.
Okay.
Like,
yeah.
I feel all of my money can save this one child, this whole in the world. But when there are more than one picture, maybe two or three or a bunch of them, I feel like I'm unable to create this kind of personal connection, and I'm doing a mission or something. I'm doing an assignment, and I may not be as passionate about it.
I understand. Yes, thank you. Does this make sense to you? What do you think? Sounds right? What do you think? Make sense to you? She said less of compassion, perhaps, less of a connection to the person when we have two of them. What are your reaction to this option? Does it seem reasonable, not reasonable? So now we know, yes, please. Seems reasonable, yeah? Yeah? Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas actually said responsibility, to see what child is the obligation.
Yeah, right. So the way that we react, the emotional compassion, how responsible we feel, right? How much we're overloaded, perhaps, that would affect how much we're willing to give. So we already have a little bit of a prediction. Let's say that we have 3 kids. What would happen with 3 kids? even lower, right? This would be the prediction. If we have 4 kids, or let's say 1 million, right? Very, very, very low. So this would decline, right? So this is really interesting. So this is what the the original was trying to show. I'll show you this in a second. Where am I? Okay, let's close this one. Yeah. So this study, I'll just come back to this in a second. I'll just show you one more study that we're going to run with the PhD students, the research students in my other class this semester. It's this one over here. It's from 1992. They did the same thing with 2,000 and 20,000 birds. So try and think, if you have, you only see one condition, and somebody says how much you would give to 2,000 birds. And then a different condition, how much would you give to 20,000 birds? We can do the similar kind of possibilities, right? It could be that they're the same. It could be that one is higher. It could be that one is lower. It would seem like if we're rational and we can give more and more, then if we have 20,000, it would be about 10 times more than 2,000, right? But maybe we don't give as much as the multiplier, but we give a little bit lower than that. But it could also be that perhaps our ability for compassion, or the responsibility that we give to birds, declines the more birds there are, right? All right, so this is the classic study from 2014. Daniel is the one who conducted this. I know Daniel because I gave a workshop in Sweden, did some replications with them, which were really interesting. Some big names, Paul Slovic. I don't know if you've heard of Paul Slovic, but he does some serious research in judgment decision making. And Alan Peters, she gave the keynote speech a month ago when I was in Vienna for a judgment decision making conference called Spudem. So big names over here published this in 2014. It's called Compassion Fade. And the findings that they reported was a little bit in line with your prediction. So Rokia, Musa, this is the emotional response, and these are the donations. So you can see that for Rokia, 25 Swedish money, Musa, 25 Swedish money, then Rokia and Musa a little bit lower than that. This is not what I predicted. I was a little bit more in line with, maybe we double, maybe a little bit less than double, but this is not like what I expected. And they were making the claim that we have less and less compassion. So our emotional reactions kind of decline when we see more people. So if we see 2 declines, see 3 declines even further, 1 million really, really goes down. So when we see one member, and this is a big effect, I think charities use this a lot, instead of showing us a lot of heads or a lot of children suffering, they show us like one kid, and this kid really looks like they're suffering. And then they try to get us to donate, and then they use that for many children, but that person, that child, that suffering child is the one that elicits the strongest response. And many people have built on this. I'll show you what happened in Psych 2020, but first I want to see what you said. Yeah, so here we are. So this is what you said. Your predictions were that people would give about 300 to Rokia, a little bit maybe lower than that, although not big a change for Musa. Could be because male or female, could be because the way of the photo, we don't really know. But what happens with Rokia and Musa, 313, which is a little bit higher than just Rokia and just Musa. Not double, but a little bit higher, like we expect people to give a little bit more. This is the very strange thing that happened in Psych 2020, Fundamentals of Social Psychology. And I put Rokia and Musa against birds. So I wanted to see what students would do with the birds compared to humans. So already we see some interesting patterns here. What do you see? Rokia versus Rokia and Musa. Rokia is 300 Hong Kong, so that's pretty accurate. Did a good job at predicting Rokia, right? What happens with Rokia and Musa? 250 Hong Kong, right? So that's really interesting. How about birds? I did 2,000 birds, and instead of doing 20,000 birds, I did 2 million birds, right? So already a big chunk of birds is less than 1 or 2 humans, right? So that's already some interesting comparisons that we can think about. Do we deserve more than birds? Something for us to discuss. And then 2,000 birds, instead of 1,000 times more for 1,000,000 birds, it drops from 175 Hong Kong to 110 Hong Kong, right? So it seems like a good replication in the classroom when I run this on my students. So this is what your previous class, so last year I also asked the students to predict, what do you think will happen here? This is the pattern, and I think this is really interesting, because if you look at what your classmates predicted a year ago and what you did, it's very similar. It's almost amazing, don't you think? Almost 1 to 1. So it seems like the way that we predict this, we're very consistent. But then, of course, we did not do a good job in predicting what the fundamentals of social psychology would do, or at least this classic article. However, I thought this is great. So I was able to demonstrate this in a Hong Kong University sample, but I wanted to know if this would work if I do this properly. So I do a pre-registration, I pre-register this somewhere, and then I run data collection with the exact same design with Rokia and Musa and a bunch of other things in there. So in the workshop that I gave a month and a half ago, we ran this on an online sample. We had a sample for this condition. We have 500 people. And what ended up happening? So you can see here, this is Rokia. This is Musa, and we're talking about US dollars. So about, I don't know, $3, $4 US dollars, $3, $4 US dollars. And then Rokia and Musa a little bit higher than that. But actually, there's not much difference, right? So this is in line more with your prediction, right? So it seems like it doesn't matter if it's like 1% or 2%. It seems like we give almost the same, but it means that per person we give about half, right? So this is not in line with the classic article, and this is not in line with the fundamentals of social psychology at HKU. So for me, this is very confusing. So the good thing is that Daniel's lab that was in SPUDEM conference for judgment decision making last month, I got the chance to talk to them, and also Alan Peters, who gave the keynote speech, and I asked them, so what do you think about this failed replication? Did you also have failed replication when you ran this? And what was their response? They said, yes, it's a very elusive effect. Sometimes we find it, and sometimes we don't. And we can't make out when this happens and when it doesn't. And actually, this is not the only one that we ran. We've been running this for a while, and it seems like we get very confusing response. Sometimes it seems to have the expected result, and sometimes it really doesn't. So I'm not sure what to make of this, which is why we ran a bunch of other replications. So I'll describe some more findings to you. And then we can look at this. Just to tell you what happened with this classic, which will run the replication this semester with the PhD students. So in 1992, what they found was there was no difference between the 2,000 birds, $80 US, 20,000 birds, 78 US dollars. And by the way, when we asked how much are you willing to donate to save Rokia, it was about like $3 or $4. The birds here is $80. I don't know, a lot of interesting things going on here. You really want to try and test this out as much as possible to think what would affect that. So I have all sorts of thoughts, but actually I posted this on Twitter and I asked, do you have some findings on identifiable victim effect or on the birds to share with me? And then it seems like people are like, yeah, this failed, and we ran this in real life, and we ran this in a charity. And so it seems like there's a whole discussion. So I think we're going to come out with like a paper that tries to summarize this very confusing literature. Now I'm going to ask you another question. So if we go back to this Mentimeter, yeah. Let's say that you have 2 refugee camps, and you want to help we want to help both, but you only have the capacity to help one of them. And whatever it is that you do, when you send the help to the refugee camp, you'll be able to save the same number of lives, 1,500 people. are going to be saved. But you can only save one camp, and there's a difference between these two camps. So one camp is a very large camp, 250,000 refugees, and one of them is a small camp, 11,000 refugees. So which one would you save? You personally, which one would you decide to send this to? And I also added another option because I know these are very difficult decisions. This is too much. I can't make decisions like that. So try and think about this. Why would you send this to this? Why would you send this to that? What's your preference? What do you think other people will answer? Make a decision. For this specific situation, what are your thoughts? Why send it to the large or the small? What are some good... the small camp, yeah, why?
Percentage that people like.
The proportion of lives saved. Why would this be a factor? Why would you care about proportion?
Although I can only save the same amount of money,
Right, yeah.
but it seems like I save more because the proportion is higher.
Okay, so you want to find a factor where you're delivering a little bit more of a, yeah. But why would you think a proportion? Why would people really care about this? Because if people don't care, it's like half would be in this and half would say that, but it will be like random choice. Why do you think there would be a preference for the proportion?
Because people always want to show how much they have.
Okay.
So
it's for us to feel good about ourselves. Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting thought. Any other thoughts about this? Yes?
So send the plane to the small camp.
The small camp, yeah?
Yeah, not because I feel like I save more, but
Okay.
because I think that I would disappoint them.
Oh, it's about disappointing nice people. So this is like the positive aspect to this, and this is like avoiding the negative, right? Very interesting aspects. Could be both of them at the same time. So many would agree to send us to the smaller camp. So we have 17. Very few of you would say the large camp. So that's interesting. And some of you, and I completely understand this, say this is too much. I just can't make decisions like that. And sometimes it is really overwhelming for us. And we'll talk about when that happens and what is like my obligation as an instructor to take that into consideration. Thanks for sharing your thoughts about this. Back to, yeah, this one. So these are the results from the last semester. So it's really interesting to contrast you to them, you to them. Very interesting. It almost looks identical. So it seems like there's consistency between the students that come to take this course every year, at least if we compare these two. Actually, we ran this replication. I mean the HKU students ran this replication, and we did this replication, I think, 2019. It took about 2 years for this to be finally published. Two actually now are PhD students, one in Chinese University of Hong Kong and the other one is in Vienna. So it seems like they've done well and they've published a lot, so they've learned something from this. Ignazio over here is now in Geneva. He's an assistant professor, and he joined our team in order to take 4 different teams that did 4 different replications in order to combine them into one and to help us submit this to the journal. And of course, him and the students are shared co-authors, so everybody's first author. All the responsibility and the credit is shared between all of them. And what we did was that there was this classic finding in 1997. Is it better to save 4,000 instead of 1,000? 4,500 out of 11,000. Or out of 250,000. So they showed that people prefer the former, to save lives if they had a higher proportion. So relating to what you said, of the total, a phenomenon they called psychophysical numbing. So what we did is that this article actually has a bunch of studies, and we decided to replicate 2 of these studies. And the way that we did this in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th year at HKU is that we had 2 teams, and in every team we had 2 groups, and each team worked on a different study. So 1 team, 2 groups, study 1. 1 team, 2 groups, study 2. And I was thinking it's like they would be consistent. So they will all find support or all find failure to find support. So successful or failed replication. And what happened really shocked us because we don't know what to make of this. This is very, very odd. I don't think this happens a lot. Hasn't happened a lot to us. But what we see is that we found mixed support with 2 successful replications of study 2. And actually, one of the groups, we ran this on Amazon Mechanical Turk using a US sample, and the other one is Prolific using a British sample. And they were very, very similar. They were almost the same. So these 2 successful replications with the 2 groups in the same team of study 2 indeed showed support for this effect. However, we also had 3 unsuccessful replications of study 1 showing instead an opposite effect, a preference for saving a smaller proportion of lives, which we weren't sure what to think about. So these are the 2 successful replications of study 2. So you can see the small cap had a higher, more people saying that they would donate to the small cap, more people here saying that they donate to the small cap than a large cap. But then we had 3 failed replications where you can see people chose the large cap over the small cap. Not by a lot, but it is what we call significant. So there is a meaningful effect that we found there. So our HKU university students did these 2, study 1A, study 1B, and study 2A, study 2B. And we thought, okay, terrific. We have inconsistent findings. We'll just send this to the journal and let them figure this out. What did the journal say? How did they respond? Something in your failed replication doesn't make sense. You might have made a mistake. There's something weird about the samples. You have to rerun this. Go back, run this a 3rd time. So poor Ignazio had to go and collect data once again. So this is study 1.3. What is the result of study 1.3? Almost identical to study 1A and study 1B. And then we're just like, we don't know what's going on here, but something weird is happening. So it seems like with these effects, sometimes we find support for these effects, but sometimes we find something that's completely opposite to that. So I would love to tell you, here, just read the Advanced Social Psychology book, and then everything will work. When you go and work in your charity and when you work in industry, if you just do identifiable victim effect, or if you have a large camp and a small, always works, 100%, no problem. I am the professor, I have spoken, follow me. But it doesn't work this way. You must test, you must try and understand what's going on. There's a mystery here, and we need to figure this out. So it's up to us as scientists to be first very humble and say, wait, we have something curious that we found in 1992, and we have something curious that we find in 2014, but it could be that we still don't know enough about this phenomenon, so we need to investigate further. So first humility, right? And then testing, a lot of testing. So whatever your context is, wherever you're going to be, your nonprofit, your industry, your academia, go and test this again and again. And here, two seminal studies already have a very interesting paradox for, we can't really solve this. We have some ideas about why that might be. It could be about study design. We're not really sure, but there's something that we need to figure out here. So even if you do, let's say you do a thesis or you do an internship or you're going to work in some other organization doing research, I strongly suggest that before you trust research finding, just replicate this. Just try and do this yourself and then take the next step in order to see whether there's something new that you can say about that. So don't take things for granted. So when I show you findings, I'm going to show you findings based on things that we've replicated. Not everything has mixed findings. Some things actually have very solid findings. And I will try and share as much of that as possible, but I will also be very honest that not everything is straightforward. This morning or yesterday, I think one of the students who sat in yesterday's class, I'm not sure, could be just a coincidence, emailed me and said, you're listed as my advisor. I really need advice because I don't know what to do. Why are you in psychology? Everything is so confusing. Nothing replicates. I don't know if I want psychology anymore. I think I want to go to computer science. Or I think I want to go to chemistry. I want to give up my undergraduate as psychology. And honestly, I completely understand, because when I did my PhD and everybody told me, yeah, we figured out this is psychology, everything works, just read the book. And then I start doing stuff, and then I see it's very complicated. So I was not trained to be humble, but then when you start doing science and you see how messy reality is, it's a very humbling kind of journey. I still haven't responded to that student, but I want to tell you, it's not better in other fields. You might think, oh, physics, they've got everything figured out. Biology, chemistry have everything figured out. When we run studies over there, everything works out. It's not for me to do a psychology course and tell you about other fields, but I give lectures about this, so you can go and find some of my lectures online. Actually, we have this problem across all of the sciences. If anything, social sciences and psychology, or social psychology, is doing a little bit better, because we are facing this, have been facing this for about 10 years, where we're trying to do more replications. It's much easier for us to get samples, so we don't have, rats, monkeys in a lab. We don't like very elaborate procedures. We don't need to bring people to scanners. We have larger samples that we can collect fairly easily, and then we can run this in real life. And then we can overcome some of these issues in order to see what is happening. But I just want to tell you, if you're feeling that psychology is unique in this way, it really isn't. We have a lot of challenges across the sciences when we need to overcome them. So the biggest one that came out last year was cancer biology. And unfortunately, they started with 193 experiments. Out of the 193 experiments that they wanted to run replications for, they can only start with 50. Why? Because if you go and you read an article about cancer biology, what is the methodology? Very easy to see the methodology in psychology. How about cancer biology? Super difficult, and people don't share because everything is proprietary. People want to make money off of this. You reach out to the authors and you say, can you please share what you did in this publication in Nature and Science? What do they say? We can't, it's IP, right? Or we can't, dog ate my homework. We can't, we moved universities, therefore we lost our laptop. We can't, there was a fire on campus. So only 50 out of 193 started. Out of the 50 that started, how many were successful replications? 5. So if you think this is psychology, it's not psychology. We have issues in science overall where first we don't run replications. We don't share our data. So there's lots of different challenges about science that we need to overcome. This is not to say that all of science shouldn't be trusted. No more need for vaccinations. Let's just, go all out and live in nature as we used to 20,000 years ago. Science has some valuable insights, but we have to test. We have to be rigorous. We have to open about this. We have to go back and test this again and again. And we want to be humble and clear, transparent about our failures so that we can improve. So our aim is to improve. In terms of charitable giving, we go to the charity and say, what is the evidence that what you're doing is effective? What is the response? Less of a dog ate my homework and more of that we never think of our work this way. We just want to do some good. Why do we need to measure what is good? Why do we need to define what is good? And then it's up to us. Like, do we trust a charity that doesn't even measure what they're doing? So we love the Red Cross. We love, Save a Child. We love all these things because they help us feel good about ourselves. And then we feel like we're doing some impact, but then we have no idea what they're actually doing with our money. So being open, transparent, testing again and again, and being humble about what we do is very, very important. Not just in psychology, but in other sciences and in general in real life, okay? All right, so I'm gonna share with you a few classic dilemmas. I want you to share your opinions with me about this. You know this because you've probably heard about this a million times, but we need to go through this so that we make sure that everybody knows about this. What's the name of this? Sorry, trolley what?
Trolley.
The trolley dilemma, yeah. What happens in a trolley dilemma? What's the situation?
Have to search for one person.
You have to kill the one person?
The outcome.
The outcome. So let's describe the outcome a little bit more clearly. Let's say the whole scenario. What is the scenario? Hold on, before the lever, what do we have? A trolley. What happens with this trolley? It's on a track. Yeah. Then what?
There are some people on the track.
Yeah, some people are somewhere where the trolley is going to get to at some point, and it's out of control, so we can't really stop the trolley. It's about to hit somebody on the track. Yes? What else?
There's a lever.
A lever. What does the lever do?
If you choose to pull the lever, the trolley will change its direction and hit one person on the side track.
Okay.
If you don't pull the lever and let the trolley just go where it was heading, it's going to hit 5.
Yeah, terrific. Thank you for that. I know it's difficult to describe the trolley dilemma. Sometimes when we think that we know how something works, like for example, I ask you, do you know how a bike works? Like, yeah, of course, bike works. Yeah, I've ridden bikes before. And then I ask, okay, please describe to me, how does the bike work? And then you're like, okay, there's like a wheel and there's like a chain and then it's not sure because then I pedal and then I don't know how this affects and then how it brake. So actually, when it comes to actually describing something, sometimes we get to think, okay, there's so many things that I need to describe. And even with the simplest trolley dilemma, which is the simplest way to model things, there's lots of different details. So there is this trolley, a runaway trolley. I don't know why it's running away from who, what caused this, but it's just going on the tracks and it's about to hit 5 people on the track. But just so happens that you walk next to this lever. And then if you pull this lever, then it has the ability to go to a different track and then it will run over, kill one person. So if you do nothing, run over 5. If you pull the lever, it will go to a different track, save 1. So what are the perspectives here? What should we do morally? What would most people say? Save the bigger population. What does that mean in this case? Pull the lever because, right. So if you do nothing, you're responsible maybe for 5 people. So 5 people will be killed. And if we just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the utility of 5 lives is more than the utility of 1 life. Therefore, it's our obligation to do something in order to save the more lives of 5 versus 1, right? What would be the, thank you for that. What would be the objection to this? Why wouldn't we do this? Yes?
Because if you pull the lever, then you are involved in this incident and you have to take responsibility. If you do nothing, then you're just a bystander.
You're just a bystander, right? So it seems like there's something about the situation where when we do something, we are involved and therefore more responsible. So if we don't do anything, maybe it's not our responsibility. And then 5 people get killed, but it has nothing to do directly with you. But with the 1, when you pull the lever, you cause that. Therefore, you're responsible. Yes.
Yeah.
Very good.
And
yeah.
Also, the 5 people are not supposed to stand on the track.
What are they doing on this track, right? Come on. Yeah. Yeah. So.
Like the person standing on the track, but supposedly there is no like train running on that track. Yeah, like the person I think.
Yeah, so they should have known because it's a runaway trolley. They should have known that if they stay over there, then they might get hit. But the one person, he never expected somebody to pull the lever and go to the other direction. So a little bit about the expectation. So very interesting. I think in this scenario, we describe this as tied up. They don't look tied up to me, but let's say that they tied up or otherwise incapacitated. So they don't have a real choice with this. They didn't choose some super villain, put them on the tracks. It's a horrific way to die. But yeah, interesting. What was it? Batman and the Joker. So Joker gave Batman 2 options who to save, right? So that's sort of a trolley dilemma. How to make this trolley dilemma situation more interesting to highlight the contrast between these 2 perspectives? We usually do this. Right? What do we do? Instead of 2 tracks, we say, okay, we have this bridge and it's over the tracks and you're standing on that bridge with another person, a stranger. And the question is, you know for a fact that if somebody drops on the tracks from the bridge, then it will block the trolley, thereby saving 5 people, right? So what is the utility here? The same, 5 versus 1, right? But here, what would most people say about this situation? Would you push the stranger from the bridge in order to fall on the tracks so that that will save 5 people? What would most people say here? What?
Just let trolleys do that.
Just let watch with the stranger as the trolley runs over the 5 people. Yeah, right? Why? What's the difference between the first one and the second one?
Because in this case,
Yeah.
when you push the stranger down the track, you'll become the murderer. You'll become the murderer that actually killed that stranger. But in the first case, you're just pulling the lever.
Yeah.
So that could be a difference.
Let's try and say the key word about what makes the difference. What makes you more of a murderer in the second one than in the first one? Because you were also talking about this, right? About you pulling the lever as you taking responsibility. What's the difference between these two? What is it here that makes it so much stronger?
You directly kill that guy.
Directly? Yeah. What?
Directly, like pulling the lever and cause him dead is indirect.
Okay, more indirect. So there's like another step in there where you're just changing the environment and then something happens. Whereas here, you need to actively touch somebody, pull them away, right? What would, let's try and imagine the situation. A stranger is next to you. You're going to push them. You want to come and push this person. What happens with this person? Does the person want to get pushed over the bridge? Gonna fight back. What happens? Let's describe the scene.
There's a certain level of interaction.
There's an interaction. What happens in this interaction?
Like a push.
We don't know, but there's the whole scene going on over there. It's like, please don't do this. Don't do this. I have a wife. I have a kid. Right? My parents, this kind of thing. They don't want to be pushed. But then you're like, no, the 5 people, I must save them. Therefore, I would push you, right? So there's you don't have all this drama in the first one, right? So here there's a lot more of something going on in our minds when we think about this. So it's interesting to see if we compare the previous situation. So what happens here? We're about half-half. It's interesting, in the class, typically we get half-half. What would happen in the second scenario? Most people would do nothing, right? So think about this. Let's say that you just happen to know what the person next to you did. And let's say that you sit next to somebody who was one of these 23. Would that change the way that you think about them? Let's say that you sit next to somebody who you saw do the push stranger off. Would that change something about the way you think about them? Perhaps just make sure that you're not together with them on a bridge when the trolley runs under, right? But it's interesting to think about what is the big difference between these two scenarios, right? Okay, let's do one more. Please move. Yeah, let's do this one. So now I had a lot of questions about the stranger. You can have a lot of questions. My question was this. You're standing on this bridge with the stranger, and the only options that we give you is to push the stranger. What is another option?
Jump.
You can jump. Why not sacrifice yourself? And it's a big question. It's like, what would happen? How much do you value yourself? And then I thought another interesting question. So we can always think of some extensions. It's like, why is this a stranger? What happens when you stand there with somebody that you love, right? So I gave people and you the options of you, your friend, and a stranger are standing on the bridge above a railway. And then you see these 5 tied up persons. And then you know that if you jump off the bridge or you push them, there will be 100% to stop the trolley. And then I give you some options. So one is do nothing, allow the trolley to kill. One is push a stranger. Why is push a friend? Then you can jump off the bridge. Or, and this is an additional one, is that you let the stranger decide, or you let your friend decide. Why do you have to bear the burden What would people do here? So here you have the option of actually ranking these. What do you think here would be the highest rank? What would people answer here? What would people prefer? What does your scientist mindset tell you? What's your prediction, at least with this class? Who would we rather push, the stranger or our friend? Why the stranger? Right? You can't kill your friend? What's so special about your friend? Maybe we have different friends. Emotional connection. Yeah. We have more emotional connection. We know this person. We're going to miss this person, right? Yeah. What's going to be higher, self-sacrifice or sacrificing somebody else? Who would we rather sacrifice, ourselves or somebody else? Somebody else, both the friend and the stranger?
Stranger.
The stranger? So let's do the three of them. So we have a stranger, we have a friend, and we have us. Who would we rather sacrifice? Stranger, followed by friend?
Equal chance for me.
Equal. Okay. Yeah. Horrible decisions, right? So I tell this story about, told this yesterday as well. I happen to occasionally, when I visit my parents, I don't see them very often, but occasionally I leave my work lying around, and then they're interested. Sometimes they read my papers, not often, but then when they see something just lying around, they maybe want to have a look. And then my mom, when she saw these trolley dilemmas, she was absolutely horrified. She's like, "This is what you study? I will not take part in this." Because for her, this is really difficult. Very emotional stuff. I really hope I'm not creating any lasting damage here in you having to face this dilemma. But we do want to know about human nature. We want to understand people and how they react to these kinds of things. And even though we think that these are hypothetical, I want us to think, when do we face these things in real life? When do you have moral dilemmas like that? So we're going to take a 5-minute break. And during that break, please think, come back, and we'll talk about this. When does this happen in real life, and how did we react? So 5-minute break. Okay, trolley dilemmas in general have a lot of memes. I want to share with you one meme. Actually, I'll share a lot of memes, but this is the one video that I have. So here's the driving test. So this is from a driving test. So how many of you have done a driving test? I don't know what the age is in Hong Kong. When can you do this in Hong Kong? 18? Yeah. So should be about this age, right? So let's say that you're facing this dilemma here.
For the last part of your driving test, you see an old man and a young kid. What do you hit?
You see an old man and a young kid. What do you hit?
Huh.
Huh? What? You need to hit something. I think you're just taking this in maybe a wrong direction, but let's see what she says.
The old man? Well, I mean, the kid has his whole life ahead of him, so I would hit the old man, right?
The brakes. You'd hit the brakes.
Yeah, so we think about all kinds of situations where, even if unintentional, we misunderstand the situation, and then we need to make a decision. So she didn't really think about hitting the brakes, and just, can you imagine her being in the situation? I'm in a driving test, and he's expecting me to say something, so what am I going to say? But it's a good question to just ask. Sometimes, like, should I really be in this situation, or maybe I'm misunderstanding something? So Philippa Foot was the one who introduced the trolley dilemmas to the world, but she was talking about actual real situations. For example, a surgeon. So the surgeon, 5 patients in a hospital expected to die soon, and there's a 6th man undergoing a routine checkup at the same hospital. So the surgeon is thinking about this, and he says the only way to save the 5 patients is to slay the 6% and transplant healthy organs into the 5%. What should we do? What do you think about this situation? Let's say you're going into a checkup. Should the surgeon just like slay you to? So we think back in the 70s, we thought this was a little bit funny and awkward and like, what do we? But recently we actually faced this problem. When did we face this? We were facing this during the pandemic. Not exactly as brutal as this, but at the beginning, we had to make some tough decisions. So we had a situation where we needed to decide who gets the ventilators. It wasn't as bad as in Hong Kong. We had because of this zero COVID policy, although at some points, with Omicron, it became pretty serious. But in many places in the world, you had very limited number of ventilators, and you needed to decide who gets them. And you needed to think, do we prioritize one population over the others? Should maybe doctors get access to ventilators if they're sick, higher priority than others? If, like this woman, we say the young deserve this over the elderly, great. Let's say that we make this decision. Somebody in Hong Kong government makes that decision. Question is, let's say at the beginning really was the case that mostly the elderly came in first because they got really sick really fast and the kids were actually not affected. So we hooked up all the elderly to ventilators. And then the young ones started coming in. What do? Do you unplug the elderly and give the ventilator to a little kid? Who gets to decide this? So we think about these things as hypotheticals, but who do we want to make this decision? My sister is a medical doctor. She just graduated 2 years ago. Being put in a pandemic situation just when you graduate, like some very horrific dilemmas in there. Very, very difficult. Do we want the individual doctor to make that decision, or do we want the Hong Kong government to make this decision? So think about these. This is no longer hypothetical. I'm going to skip this video, but if you want to watch the video about the trolley dilemma, then you're welcome to. Let's try and connect this. So last week we had Wesley, the subway hero. So you can model this as a trolley dilemma. In this case, there was actually like a trolley or like a subway. Right? So actually there was something that was running and was coming and you can't control this, and somebody was on the track. Right? So we didn't think about this as a more moral dilemma in a trolley problem, but it really is. You can model these things. So there's something clean about a trolley dilemma that allows you to take a very complex situation and put it into, okay, you have this track and you have that track. And then what are the paths that are available for you in this kind of situation? We can also model Wang Yue. Would you save the baby? So go back and think about this. How would you model this? Or would you jump and save the girl? You can also model this as a trolley dilemma. So Philippa Foot and this trolley dilemma obsession gave us some really good tools to try and think about moral dilemmas. But of course, a lot of people over time started to make fun of these things. So you can see a lot of memes. So the way that, you think you're the one making the decisions and pulling the lever and deciding all sorts of things, but it's usually people with the money who decide these things for you, and usually they tend to prefer one another. So a thumbs up. I don't know if you can see this between them two. And then we're the ones left to be run over by the trolley just from social status, social class. Other things, like sometimes it's like there's 1 and there's 5, but there's also like a chance, whether there's a fourth of a chance that 5 people die. So you can go and look at the website for many, many different options. Last year, the Biden administration in the US decided to waive student loans. I hope you don't have any student loans. I don't think this is something that really happens in Hong Kong quite a lot, but it's a natural way of just being an American and going to these private institutions and paying just ridiculous amounts of money. So by the time that people graduate, they're like $300,000 in debt. So people were saying, but why forgive them the student loans? Nobody forgave my student loans. And somebody tried to model this as a moral trolley dilemma, saying, but if I divert the trolley now, it would be unfair to all the people that are already killed, therefore not save them. So I thought that's like an interesting tool. I don't know if I endorse one way or the other, But I think this is like an interesting way to think about this because it allows you a different perspective on a much more complex dilemma. Some people are just plain evil, so they're just like, I want to kill the 5 and the 1. Can I do this? Why would be the right way to do this? If you're the devil, is there an option to kill the 5, turn around and finish the 6? But I was very surprised to see a technical solution to the trolley dilemma. Do you know this one with the Hello Kitties? So it turns out somebody solved the trolley dilemma. How to solve the trolley dilemma? Here we go. So if you pull the lever right at just at the right moment, when the first 2 wheels are over the point and the back wheels have not yet crossed over, switch it, then it just gets stopped to drag. So interesting. People are very creative. I love what people are doing with the trolley dilemmas. Some absurd ones. So would you rather run over 5 people or the Mona Lisa? So what would you rather? So you can go and play with this and you can see how you compare to other people. So it's called absurd trolley problems. If you want to add your own, you could. This is the Trolley Man. So this is the next upcoming DC Marvel universe kind of thing. It's like, oh no, that ship with all these people are sinking. Help us. Don't worry, I will save them. Hooray. I just need to kill one of you to activate my powers. So people really very creative stuff. All right. One more question I have for you on the Mentimeter. Where was this? Yeah. So I want to ask you, if you know about somebody, let's take the first trolley dilemma. So would you, let the trolley hit the 5, or would you pull the lever to divert to the 1? Do people prefer utilitarians, or do people prefer dentologist? Who would you want as your friend? Who would you want as your romantic social partner? Right? Would you prefer to be with somebody who is a utilitarian, or would you rather be with somebody who is a dentologist? So utilitarians are the ones that prefer the 1 to the 5. So it means that they would divert this to run over the 1 instead of the 5. And odontologists would be just like, don't act, don't take part in this. Right? So what are your thoughts? What do people prefer? Who would you prefer as a friend? Who do you think other people would prefer? What are your thoughts? Sorry? We would prefer odontologists. Why? Mm-hmm.
What should be the best outcome?
Mm-hmm.
So if the oncologist they disagree on it, then you kind of make sure that she won't do something that harms my interests.
Yeah. Yeah. Would the other person come after me if it would be better for utility, right? And the odontologist is like, they like me, I'm a likable person, therefore maybe they will take this into consideration and not harm me, right? So it's yeah. So it's interesting. If we look at what we answered here, so we have like 18 of you, about half, right? But it seems like when we go into the literature, we had 2 teams here that published in the same journal at almost the same time. They both submitted this to the Journal of Experimental Psychology Journal, which all of us in the psychology department really want to publish in. And I know this team, they're very famous. Dave has a podcast called Very Bad Wizard that I recommend. Molly Crockett, we're going to talk about her and some of the stuff that she does, cool stuff that she does with moral psychology. And then we have Dries and Arne over here that do very interesting stuff with trolley dilemmas. It's amazing because both of them worked on the same problem at the same time, but didn't know of each other, and they both submitted to the same journal. And what happened at the end is that the editor needed to make a decision what to do with this. And then they decided that they're going to publish both, which is actually very unusual. So they published this one first, and then he let them publish theirs, being framed as a replication study, but they had nothing to do with this, even though it's called a replication study. But it's amazing because they found almost exactly the same thing. And what they found was very much in line with what you were saying. So they found that across 5 studies, we show that people who make deontological judgments are preferred as social partners, perceived as more moral and trustworthy, and are trusted more in economic games. Interesting, right? And they found the same thing, this group over here. Present studies clearly confirm the main findings by this group, that deontologists are more trusted than utilitarians in social dilemma games. Seems like a very clear and straightforward finding, right? So this guy here, Prasad, who we know, I studied with him during my PhD, and he has done a lot of replications with us, with HKU students. He has published, I think, like 5 or 6 replications with us, with HKU. And it was interesting because he was trying to run this again, and he couldn't get the same kind of findings. So what did he do? He actually contacted Dries. So this is the same Dries from here, Dries here, and Dries here, and Arnie, and this Arnie, and said, I can't get to replicate this. Can we run this one more time together? But this time they did this as a registered report. A registered report means that you first design the best study that you can, you make a plan, and you submit the plan to the journal before the data collection. And then the reviewers give you good feedback to say, maybe you should improve this, maybe you should improve that. And once everybody agrees together that this is the best plan, the editors, the reviewers, and the authors all agree, then the journal says, in principle acceptance. You will get acceptance no matter what the outcome is. So it's very nice that these authors collaborated with Prasad in order to try and get this. And what they found at the end is very interesting. It's this kind of crisscross and interaction. And the conclusion is, while we find some evidence that trust perceptions of others are moderated by all sorts of dilemma features, which would explain why they have conflicting results, we find much stronger effect of participants on moral preference. Deontologists favored other deontologists, and utilitarians favored utilitarians. So that's kind of interesting, right? But if we look at the contrast between the first dilemma that we looked at, most people would actually say that they would pull the lever. About 90% would say that they would pull the lever. In this classroom, it's about like half-half, but they would pull the lever. But then when we ask people, who would you prefer? People say, no, we prefer the deontologists. We don't like the utilitarians. So there's a little bit of a mystery over there. Which is why this actually makes a lot of sense. Utilitarians like utilitarians, and deontologists like deontologists. So I like this kind of conclusion. This is a case where we had mixed findings. The literature said something, one thing. Somebody came and said, but I can't replicate this. We should work on this together. They joined. They did a registered report, and then they came to some interesting mixed findings that would explain this with an interaction with the moderation. So I feel like this is how science should proceed, right? A lot more registered reports, a lot more adversarial collaborations where people try to find out what the truth is. Okay. Would you judge others for not doing so, for helping or not helping? Who is this guy? Donald Trump. How do we know him? Former president of the United States. Possibly future president of the United States. We don't really know what's going to happen there. Complicated things going on in the US. It's baffling. Every time I open the newspaper, I'm just like, what is going on? I don't really understand. Problem with the US is that it has a lot of crazy people that go into high schools, movie theaters, shopping malls, and just start shooting people. We used to think that we're safe here in Hong Kong, but then occasionally there's like somebody that takes a knife in Hong Kong and starts going after people. So maybe Hong Kong is starting to look a little bit like the US, but not as bad. Like over there, it's really like they take machine guns and just like start spraying kids. And this was about the Florida shooting. And the question is, should you go and try to go into a place where you've got a mad person with a gun in order to interfere? And there were some security guards over there that didn't act like that. There were some police that came in and they didn't go straight in, waiting for reinforcements. And Donald Trump was not happy about this. So before I play this clip, asking you again, put the scientist hat on and ask questions. What questions do you have for Mr. Trump, Donald Trump, when you hear him say these things?
You know, I got to watch some deputy sheriffs performing this weekend. They weren't exactly Medal of Honor winners, all right? The way they performed was frankly disgusting. They were listening to what was going on. The one in particular, he was early, then you had three others that probably a similar deal a little bit later, but a similar kind of a thing. You know, I really believe, you don't know until you test it, but I really believe I'd run in there even if I didn't have a weapon. And I think most of the people in this room would have done that too, because I know most of you. But the way they performed was really a disgrace.
Yeah. Any questions for Donald Trump? What do you want to ask him as scientists? What is he saying? You don't know it until you test it. But I really believe that if I would be in that situation, what would he do? Run in there, even if he doesn't have a weapon. Not only that, I really believe that all of you, because I know you, that you would do the same, because you're good people. How many of you would run into the school even if you didn't have a weapon? No? No? How many of you would do this? Run into a school unarmed? How many of you know for sure that you wouldn't do this? Some of you? Yeah? A few of you more? Yeah? Right? Now my question to you is, and this is like the last part of this session. We want to know, as scientists, we want to test to see whether Donald Trump, if faced with this situation, would he really do this? How to test? How to know if Donald Trump would behave like this or not? What can we do as scientists? Sorry? Who spoke? In a real situation, yeah, get another madman to get into a school and then bring Donald Trump and say, this is your moment to shine, right? Do something, right? We laugh, but this would actually test this. If we don't want to go as far as that, let's not do anything with schools and mad people. What can we do? Seems like if we give him a hypothetical scenario, he already knows what he's going to do, but we want to challenge him a bit more than that. What can we do? Have you visited the VR lab in psychology? Yeah? Did you put you did? You did? Did you put the goggles on? Did you walk through the space? Yeah? Yeah? Does it look realistic? No? Oops. Actually, there's some really good VR games in Hong Kong. They're pretty realistic. They're getting really good, like 4K. It's pretty smooth, and you feel like you're underwater and all this. If you haven't done this with your friends, like it's a real adventure. It's a little bit costly, but it's worthwhile, I don't know, for a birthday or something. But hopefully our VR will catch up with this. There's still work to be done, but at some point, hopefully this will become realistic. So maybe we can simulate this. Would this really be a good test of Donald Trump? Let's just hook up Donald Trump and give him Florida shooting. What would he do? Maybe same thing, right? Is this a real test? No, we want a better test. What can we do? So yeah. Let's talk about how to do this in real life. So familiar names. Do you know Dries and Arnie? Same Dries and Arnie? Tested this in real life. For a long time, we didn't know how to do this in real life. How did they do this? Of mice, men and trolleys. They got people into the lab and they gave them some trolley dilemmas and said, what would you do in this situation? So here's a Florida shooting situation. Well, how would you act with it? And then a week later, they had them brought them into the lab. And then they brought them into a situation where there was a cage with 1 mice and a cage with 5 mice. And there was a countdown buzzer that said, if you do nothing, the 5 mice will die of electric shock. If you push the buzzer, only 1 mice will die. So obviously they were trying to deal with the emotional burden of dealing with people, but they were able to convince their ethics committee that people will not have the same kind of emotional distress over doing this with mice. What are your thoughts about this? Some people also get distressed by killing mice, right? No mice were killed in this experiment, so this was a deception. And sometimes we try to convince our ethics committee that the deception is warranted, because what we can learn from this is a lot more than the potential PTSD that the participants would have. But of course, after the experiment, we sit down with them and we try to debrief them and say, if you need some counseling, we have this center to help you, and make sure that they weren't affected by this. So very innovative stuff. Dries came to HKU. We were hoping that he would become faculty here, but pandemic happened and all sorts of other things. So that didn't work out. But he came and he talked about this project, which was really interesting. And the reactions in the academic community to this were people were just enraged by this. So these are some of the reactions, commentary about, first of all, what did you do? Second of all your conclusions are wrong. Third is like a long list of things. And he was just like a PhD student, starting perhaps a postdoc. It's a lot of stress when you submit to a journal and you get these kinds of reaction. But at least I'm glad to say that this started a debate about, are moral dilemmas using trolley situations, is this really reflective of real life or not? And actually what he was claiming here is that our results indicate that the responses to hypothetical dilemmas are not predictive of real life dilemmas. So it's, Mr. Trump, very nice that you think that you will go into this kind of situation, but maybe we bring Donald Trump to a lab with mice in cages and have a countdown and see how he would react to this. So would this be a good test of Donald Trump and moral dilemmas? Perhaps also a little bit problematic, not as far. So we thought, okay, this is as far as we can go. Like, we've tested this with mice. Let's just stop there. But to my great surprise, somebody did this with people. Who did this with people? Huh? A TV show did this with people, and we're going to watch what it is that they did. I'm going to show you the setup, and then I'm going to show you the participant, one participant out of the many that they show over there. And I want you to seriously consider this. Put on your scientist hat and tell me, think about this. What is going on here? Is this okay? What are the implications? What is it that we do when we study these things, when we run this on our participants? When I give this to you in a classroom, what are the implications of these things? So this really gives us a unique opportunity to test moral dilemmas. So let's see the setup.
Is where we're going to physically create the trolley problem in real life. Not with a trolley, but with a train. Our subjects will sign in at this booth for our phony focus test, which will never actually take place. It's going to be a hot day for them, so we'll offer them, while they wait for the actual test to begin, the chance to sit inside this nice air-conditioned remote switching station. Inside, they'll meet a kindly train switch operator, supposedly an employee of the California Railroad Authority. The California Railroad Authority is real fake. We invented this non-existent government organization to convince our subjects that everything here is real, including these monitors showing supposedly live shots of actual trains from different tracks all around the California area. While the participant is waiting inside this room, they'll learn how the operator switches the tracks using a lever to remotely switch a train from one track to another. They'll see it happen. We're actually controlling the video on these screens from a different hidden control room. At a given time, the switch operator will leave the subject alone in the switching station. And at that point, a crisis will occur. Train will be barreling down the tracks, and workers will have made their way out to both tracks, 5 on one worker on his phone on the other. No one is around for them to alert who has any kind of control or authority. Switching the train is up to the subject alone. They'll feel like what they do has real-world consequences. Will 5 people die, or will 1?
Okay, did you understand the setup? Everything is clear? Seems very realistic, right? They went into a lot of trouble in order to try and get this right. All right. One participant, after they ran a few, so they'll make a summary at the beginning and then explain about this one.
It is quite the test. At this point, 1 subject had switched the tracks and 5 others had not. But we weren't done yet. Meet Corey.
Here, have a seat.
Much obliged, thank you. This is cool.
This whole module will interconnect with the entire nation if we wanted it to.
Right.
You know, but right now we're looking at just track 1 on the left, track 2 through there. Nice. These are many, many miles away.
Yeah.
But they're all live feeds.
Surveying the scene, Eagle's point of view.
Yeah. Let me see what this is. Okay, I'll be right back.
Okay, got it.
He's remaining engaged.
Here come the workers.
Oh no.
Attention. Object on track.
Yeah.
So he realizes there's a potential problem.
I think he's gonna go out.
Attention. Train approaching.
There's a train coming.
Okay.
Attention. Object on track.
Yeah.
Attention. Train approaching.
Okay, he realizes there's no one there. It's urgent.
Okay, so it needs to go to...
Object on track.
Okay, he's rehearsing what to do.
Attention.
Track 2. Do they not know?
Attention.
I know. They should see this.
Object on track. Attention. Train approaching. Attention. Object on track. Attention. Object on track.
Get out.
End of test.
Okay, good.
Everyone is safe.
Hello?
Hi, Corey.
Hey.
My name's Michael.
There was just almost an accident, seemingly.
Corey, everything that just happened was an experiment.
Okay.
No one was in danger.
For sure.
These were just loops of video taken before. This is a psychology experiment looking at how people behave in various circumstances.
Okay, yeah.
So, tell me how you were feeling.
Mainly a bunch of terror and responsibility because I was at the helm. And just horrified about making a decision between like 5 people compared to 1. It was very scary to say the least.
It was scary.
Yeah,
right.
Oh yeah.
What was going through your mind as the train's coming down the track?
It was mainly to warn them.
They're just
what's coming up right now?
You don't want to have to choose between people.
Right.
And that was really tough. Either like 6 families or 1 family. It was like up to me, it felt like. Yeah.
It was interesting to me that you had such presence of mind.
Yeah, look.
Difficult stuff. I've watched this many times and it always affects me, right? Yeah. What are your thoughts? Yes, please. Yeah. I don't think he will ever forget this. This will stay with him for a very, very long time. Even though he now knows that this was fake, he gets to meet the actors afterwards. There's a lot of debriefing. They offer him counseling and all this. But it's tough to watch this, right? So can you imagine being in this situation? Right? You cannot imagine the kind of impact that this has on a person. So for sure, we have some ethical concerns here. I have ethical concerns about this being done. The one next to the TV host is a psychologist, and they ran this with an ethics. I don't know exactly how they rationalize this. I have a lot of questions, but they ran this, and I feel it's very important to share this with you. I feel like it's important for us to know what actually happens in real life. We didn't have a large enough sample. I don't know if we can make statistically significant. There's all sorts of things that make this. It's a TV show, though. We can't really have any scientific conclusions from this. But somebody has taken, did this, and now when we watch this, I think we understand why nobody else has done this, because it's really difficult. Thank you. Anything else that comes to mind? Anything else you want to share watching this? Questions you have? Yes, please.
Informed consent, but
informed consent.
If the participants there will be both audio and video recorded before they enter into the AC room, and whether they would be like all of their reactions, including the debriefing, would be exposed to the reality TV show.
Yeah. So actually they got them, so they came there in order to participate in an experiment, but they just thought that they were waiting for the real participants to take place. So actually they had informed consent for a general experiment. They didn't tell them what part, at what stage the experiment is starting. So definitely a deception here. And they did not have informed consent for that. Right? They didn't know that they were videoed. So yeah, a lot of things that we need to take care of that. But there's a reason why we do ethics committees, and there's a reason why we do informed consent, why we have debriefing, why we're very, very careful about deception, right? Last thing I want to show you is something from the last year. So in the last year, we discovered that we have the power to know what people would do in a certain situation without ever putting them in this situation. How to do that? ChatGPT-4 came out. Lots of discussions at HKU. Should we allow students to do this? What is education after we have ChatGPT? Should we have tests and submissions? Does it make it? Can we as instructors even control ChatGPT? Don't know about all of that. Don't want to assume anything. We'll figure this out at the end or not. Doesn't really matter. But what's interesting is where the research actually took this. And then what they did was you can go to ChatGPT-4 and you can feed it information saying, try and think of yourself as a person who has these characteristics. Male, female, social status, from this place. And let's say that you were presented with these questions and this is how you answered. Try and predict how you would answer if faced with a trolley dilemma. And then what they did is they correlated this with the real answers, and they looked at whether ChatGPT simulates people's responses accurately. And what is the correlation? Correlation is 0.95. 0.95. ChatGPT can simulate people so well that it's almost indistinguishable from how people actually respond. And this is ChatGPT-4. The next version is going to be even more interesting than that. So if you're doing research, so people have shown this in many different situations. So this is ChatGPT, this is humans. So ChatGPT seems a little bit more extreme. Here it's a little bit more extreme than humans, but when you compare the two, it's really interesting. ChatGPT versus human, ChatGPT versus human. So we see very high correlations regardless of the tasks. So let's say that you're doing your thesis, your internship, or even in industry. You want to know how people behave, but you don't have the money and you don't have the time. First thing, as a pretest, what you can do, simulate some people And there's enough information, enough public data sets out there that we can take and simulate that information. And then feed it and say, ChatGPT, if you are this person, how would you act in my experiment? And then you can figure out and see, does it go into something I want to change, something I want to add? Try different scenarios before you go to the real participants. Some people are talking about, okay, maybe we just simulate people. We don't need to test real people anymore. I wouldn't go as far as that. And ChatGPT 4 still has some flaws, but it's really a good tool that we've never addressed before. So how to test things in real life? Mice, slightly or even very unethical simulations of real life, or we can have some more advanced ChatGPT artificial intelligence simulation of people, to try and see how people would behave. So today was meant in order to give you a taste of moral dilemmas. What would we do? How to take a very complex situation like the subway hero or Wang Yue and think about this in terms of a moral trolley dilemma. And we'll increase complexity, and we'll talk about more and more of that in the upcoming semester. You also have a task where you can have kind of like a moral dilemma between two charities. One charity does this, one charity does that. So your team will think of 10 to 20 of these kinds of contrasts between charities. And then I will test this with real people. First, I will give this to ChatGPT to give you some initial conclusions so you can analyze this. But we are going to run this on real participants afterwards. So you'll get a chance to do your own kind of like trolley dilemmas, but more like with charities. This charity does this, this charity does that. Okay? So we'll talk more about those. Any questions? All right, so read the syllabus, do the syllabus quiz, and next week we'll start with the journey after the ad drop here. See you next week.